Welcome to part 3 of the Draw This Halloween special. In this part of the series, I'm going to draw a human skull while describing my process so that you can follow along. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm here in Corel Painter 2015, and what I have here is a grid, and this grid is going to help us draw in proportion. So what I've done is I've made a square, and then I've multiplied that square 3 wide by 4 tall, and that's about the standard ratio of a human skull. So the way that I created that grid was I created a new canvas. This particular canvas is just 14 by 14 at 300 dpi, but you could use any size canvas that you want. I select the rectangular shape tool. You want to make sure that stroke is enabled and that fill is turned off. So if it's blue, it's on. If it's black, it's off. And then the color of your stroke, you can go ahead and change to something, let's say this red color here. And then if you draw and you hold shift while you're drawing, you're going to get a perfect square, and that's very important. So we'll make a square like so. We'll go ahead and use the layer adjuster to move it around. And then if you hold Alt on your keyboard and you drag, you're going to drag a duplicate. Just make sure that it lines up on both the edges here pretty well. Drag another duplicate by holding Alt and dragging, and now we have 3. I'm going to hold Shift so that I select all 3 of these and just move them up here. And then I'm going to hold Alt again and drag, and now I can drag a copy of all 3 of these. You want to make sure that they line up pretty well here. Doesn't have to be exactly perfect. As long as the line is pretty much connected everywhere, that'll be good enough. And we can go ahead and group all of these layers by using Shift again. We'll do Control G to group them, and we can call this group grid. If for some reason you wanted to change the color of this grid, what you can do is just go ahead and collapse all of these layers by doing Control E, select the grid layer, turn on Preserve Transparency, and you could pick any color you want and use the scratchboard tool to paint over the grid, or you could use the fill command to just fill the whole grid. So I'm just going to use this original grid that I have here. You'll notice it doesn't line up perfectly here, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. This is just a guide for where we're going to place everything on our skull. So if you know where all of the points of the skull line up on this grid, it should be pretty easy to draw. So this bottom line represents the bottom of the chin. This line represents the top edge of the upper lip. This eye represents the horizontal axis for the eyes, and this line represents the skull top. These vertical lines represent the sides of the skull. There are some intersections, like right here and here are the eye centers, and the top corner of the upper mouth is right here and here. And there are some subdivisions that we can use as well if we subdivide these squares perfectly in half. The skull apex is right here at this intersection, and the jaw apex is right here at this intersection. The horizontal axis for the nose is centered on this line here, and the lower edge of the bottom lip is this line here. What's important is that all of this stuff is centered on your canvas, and so what we're going to do is we're going to turn on mirror painting mode. That's going to put a guide right down the center. We don't want to move it. We just want to make sure that all of our guides are centered on that. So what you can do is you can go ahead and just select all of your guides and group them together. And if you use the layer adjuster tool, you can move them left or right. I'm going to hide all these notes just for now, and then I'm going to select the grid layer. And to make sure that this is centered, what I can do is I can hit Control T on my keyboard to enable free transform. Free transform is going to put a transform box around this, and you'll be able to see that center dot represents the exact center of that grid. So I know I need to move it left a little bit. I can use the arrow keys to just nudge it a few times. Hit Control T again, see if that dot's lined up. If it's not, hit T a few more times. May take a few tries. I think that's pretty centered there. So now we can go ahead and start doing a basic sketch for our skull. I'm going to go ahead and turn down the opacity of these guide layers so that they're not so dominant. And let's create a new layer. We'll go ahead and move it below the grid, and let's call it Sketch. We'll pick a dark gray color, and we'll use the detail oils brush to start sketching in some of these details. I'm going to make my brush a little thinner, and you'll see that if we're drawing in mirror painting mode, we only really have to draw on one side, so that's pretty helpful. So let's go ahead and start with the easy parts. We know the skull top's going to be here, so we'll just draw a little line, curved line there. And then we know that the bottom of the jaw is going to be right here. So let's do the bottom of the chin. Along this vertical line here, this will be the side of the skull. So we'll just put in a line there. We know that the jaw apex is going to be here, so we can put in kind of a little diagonal line. We know that the upper mouth corner is going to be here. We can do a diagonal line that way. And now we can start connecting some of these lines. So let's go ahead and do this top one first. Start to draw a pretty even curve that kind of intersects with that skull apex there. Let's go ahead and do the bottom edge of the jaw. We can go ahead and connect that with a diagonal line. And you can always take out your eraser by hitting N to just fix some of those lines. You hit B to switch back to the brush. So we want this jaw to curve up and start to go kind of vertical right about here. And then let's connect it to this line up here lightly. There's an area of the skull that kind of bulges out next to the eyes. It kind of goes right out like this. Now we'll add in a few more guides to help us place everything else. So we know that our lower edge of our bottom lip is going to be here, so we can kind of sketch that in. This is going to be the bottom edge of the teeth. And our upper mouth is going to be on this line here, so we can go ahead and sketch in that area for that. Right in the center of that, that's the center of the teeth. So they go kind of straight across here, and then when they hit this vertical line, they kind of start to curve. Diagonal, like so. We can use this line here to intersect with that point. Go ahead and finish it off. So here's our teeth area. And from the corner of the mouth up, we'll draw a little wedge shape. Next, let's sketch in the nose. The nose is kind of centered in this square here. It's kind of a diamond shape. And it's centered right on this intersection here. Let's go ahead and draw in our eyes. And go kind of like this. You want them to be pretty centered on this area here, so you may need to bring them in more. Feel free to use your eraser as you need to kind of clean this up and make it look a little better. Switch back to my brush, and I'm going to sketch in a little more, kind of connect the side area here of the head to the side of the eye. There's a contour kind of like that. And of course it helps to have a reference to look at. You can just pull up a picture online, or if you happen to have a human skull lying around your house, you could take that and study it a little bit. And that'll help you decide where to place all of these things. I'm going to go ahead and connect this little protrusion here. Forgive me for not knowing the anatomical terms for all these parts. Going to curve the jawbone a little bit, like so, and use the eraser to erase some of this. So a little bit of a curvature here on the jawbone that we'll draw in. We can start detailing the teeth a little bit. We're going to have the center of the teeth here, like so. And we want about 10 teeth or so. So we'll just kind of loosely sketch them in. It doesn't have to be perfect. Let's do the same thing along the bottom edge. Starting to look more like a skull. I'm going to switch back to my brush. I'm just going to add a few more little contours here and there to help establish the form of the bone. And now at this point we don't really need our guides anymore, so we can just hide that grid layer. Now we can detail this skull a little bit more. Let's turn down the opacity of the sketch layer as well. And you could really draw this and shade this any way you want. I think for this example I'm going to use the liquid ink brushes because I rarely use those in my tutorials, if at all, and I think they're actually pretty neat. Now, these particular brushes are proprietary to Corel Painter, so you probably want to save this as a riff rather than a PSD like I usually have you do. So I'm going to go ahead and save this as a riff, and once we're done drawing, we can go ahead and save it as a PSD or anything else if you want. So I'm going to use this Ink Plus brush, which is also known as the Graphic Bristle. I'm going to select black, and this is a really cool brush because you can kind of add ink, and then you could subtract from it with the Graphic Bristle resist, like so. And it gives you this nice graphic design ink look, and I think that works really well for the skull. So I'm going to select ink, and I'm going to go ahead and just fill in the darkest areas first. I'm not going to worry about doing a super accurate drawing because I want this to look kind of spooky. You can tap here and there to get a more speckled result. That'll help you do the shading for the inside of the eyes. And anywhere if you overpaint, you can always use that Graphic Bristle resist to subtract. So if I need to do that here, I'll select that ink minus, and I can tap with that, or I can brush with it to erase. I'm going to go back to adding and just going to time lapse this so that you don't have to listen to me ramble. And once I'm done filling this in, we'll go ahead and catch up. Okay, so I've got some basic shading done, and now I'm going to go ahead and turn off the mirror painting mode so that we no longer have symmetry because we don't want the whole thing to be symmetrical. And I don't really need my sketch anymore. I'll go ahead and hide that. I'm going to continue adding more shading. This time I'm going to use some lines, and I'm going to try to follow the contours of the skull here while I'm drawing. Alright, so I think that'll do it for the shading. I'm going to zoom out quite a bit and see how this looks from far away. Usually if it looks good small, it looks good big. And I think it does. So there you go. That's how you can paint a spooky human skull. If you enjoyed this Halloween episode of Draw This, take a quick second to like this video and share it with your friends on YouTube and on Facebook. And don't forget to click the subscribe button to see more of my videos as they're released. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.